One of the nation's best prospects, the number one offensive tackle in the country, Francis Mauigoa, signs with the Miami Hurricanes. There's reasons to be very, very excited about this five-star recruit. When we saw him over the summer, he was a guy that had all of the high rankings, and he absolutely dominated and delivered at the UA Future 50, had a great senior year at IMG. He's someone that has all the high accolades, but he backs it up with his play. You're certainly impressed every time you see him play.
Yeah, I mean, watching Francis Mauigoa at that Future 50, I mean, some of the nation's best pass rushers were there. I know when, I think Christo was a weather delay or something like that, they came back and they lined up Deshaun Womack, who had been just really bullying around some offensive linemen all morning. He's an LSU commit or signee potentially at this point. And Francis Mauigoa, they gave him 2 or 3 reps to go at it to kind of crown the trenchman. And Francis Mauigoa cleanly, easily seemed to win those reps, again, against a guy who was kind of dominating that. Francis Mauigoa is a potential, again, bookend tackle for the Hurricanes. His player comp is Penei Sewell, obviously someone Mario Cristobal and Alex Mirabal are extremely familiar with, someone that they developed up in Eugene, was the first tackle off the board for the Detroit Lions in that draft when he was taken. Starts at right tackle for them, made a play to made a receiving play to kind of move the sticks for the Lions. I mean, Francis Mauigoa is potentially a first round NFL draft pick. This is an absolutely monumental win for Cristobal and Coach Mirabal, in terms of just beating out the nation's absolute best for who the composite considers the number one ranked offensive tackle in the country. I mean, these are the type of prospects that help change things up front, especially in the trenches, the way Cristobal and those guys always kind of preach about that being where it starts and where it ends. Definitely a massive, massive win for the program.
Listed at nearly 6'6", 330 pounds. There's a lot to like about him physically. Strong base. He has great legs there, great strength, but his arm placement, his strength with his arms is great too. There's a lot physically. He moves well for a big guy. But once again, one of these guys that brings great mentality to the team, to a program. He's kind of has this leadership quality to him. He has this toughness to him. He's just someone that, once again, every time you see him, you just come away impressed with how he carries himself on and off the field.
Yeah, absolutely. Total 100% culture guy. Francis Mauigoa. I think it's obvious with the way that they've recruited this class of 2023 that they are not only getting, super talented kids, they're also getting, again, high character kids. Francis Mauigoa definitely fits that bill. I think he's going to be one of those guys that we're going to see wearing a C on his chest at some point over the course of his Miami career, because he is just that type of guy. You mentioned his kind of on-field stuff. I mean, just kind of talking to people familiar with the offensive line position, there's not many who people say is more polished in terms of a high school offensive lineman, more of a sure thing on the offensive line than Francis Mauigoa, just because he's so advanced compared to his peers. And I think it's going to be a pretty seamless transition into the college game. And yeah, it is tough to be a freshman and start for a Power 5 program like Miami. But if anyone's equipped to do so, I think it's Francis Mauigoa, and I would not be surprised whether that be at tackle or maybe even at guard to start his career if he's, running out with the first team when Miami, kicks off their season next September. 5-star
offensive tackle Samson Okunlola signs with the Miami Hurricanes. A huge get for the Hurricanes, a 5-star talent. There's a lot to like about this 6'5", 305-pounder.
I mean, yeah, you mentioned it, blue chip. I mean, really top-end talent. These are the type of prospects that Mario Cristobal, Alex Mirabal need to stack if they want to reinvent that offensive line. Really, really impressive pickup for them down to the wire with Florida. Really Michigan State, too, there at the end. And Mario Cristobal, those guys found a way to come up on top for the nation's number 3 offensive tackle. I mean, that's the way to do it. It's done through the trenches. That's the way that they want to build this thing out, kind of start it up front and then kind of build it out. So, I mean, this is just a massive win for the program, and picking up his signature is, these guys are ready to get him on campus and start getting their hands on him.
Yeah, you touched on it. This staff absolutely wants to have a strong offensive line, but to me, it's one thing to say you want to do it, but to go out and execute it and getting high-level talent like Samson really shows a lot, especially when this was, as you mentioned, a difficult recruiting task. It makes it more difficult when you only win 5 games. So to be able to do this, and have confidence from the recruits to in your coaching staff and what you're building says a lot about this staff. They should definitely be excited. Miami fans should be excited about this one because it fills an extreme need for this program. And anytime you can get a tackle, whether it's left or right, you definitely feel good about your recruiting class. And certainly Samson has a lot to offer, and also a recruiting area that certainly Miami does well at times in, but this definitely adds to that case.
Yeah, Samson Okunlola is a potential day one, starter for Miami, whether that be at a tackle spot or whether that be even potentially at guard. I mean, he is one of the freakiest athletes along the offensive line that you'll see. All you got to do is scroll to his social media page, look up his pinned tweet, and watch him kind of exploding out of, off of his knees into like a pass set and kind of, kick stepping back. I mean, the guy can absolutely move. He's a technician. He's a hard, relentless worker. And again, just a high level athlete, also a big time wrestler too. So, these are you don't want to just add big, massy bodies to the offensive line. You want athletes up there, and that's exactly what Miami's getting in Samson Okunlola.
It's going to be exciting to see where his career goes from here. As you mentioned, he's going to have an opportunity, whether he earns it or whatever, but he's certainly going to have an opportunity to show what he can do immediately. And certainly you like the future, but the future could be now with Samson and his abilities. Like you mentioned, his pass blocking and run blocking look good. It looks like he'll be ready to go, certainly compete and be in the mix. And that's what you want with these high level guys. Miami lands 6'6", 330-pound offensive lineman Tommy Kinsler out of Ocala Trinity Catholic High School. He's one of these guys, when you see him in person, he certainly stands out.
Oh my gosh, yes. I mean, in terms of physically, Tommy Kinsler might be the biggest of the bunch. And there was a photo that surfaced, of him on his official visit back during the summer months next to Samson Okunlola, the 5-star offensive lineman. And Tommy Kinsler is pretty significantly bigger than Okunlola. And, I think that's where the promise is. That's where the upside is. Maybe not someone that's going to be a day one contributor, but man, I think that they feel really good about what he could be a couple years down the line. Again, what he has, you can't teach. He has that natural size. And I think what excites some people is that when he is kind of going, when he's kind of maybe into it and maybe just kind of has that fire lit, he puts together some really, really impressive stuff. I think that there's times also where, maybe if he's just kind of, going through the motions, he can kind of slip up in those things. But I think when Miami gets him right, gets him in that mind frame where you're going 100% every single snap, every single rep, I think you have to be super encouraged about what Tommy Kinsler could potentially bring to the interior offensive line. I mean, again, that size, man, is really, really big. We saw Nez Cooper contribute as a true freshman. Definitely a little bit bigger than Tommy Kinsler in terms of weight and all that stuff. But man, Tommy Kinsler doesn't necessarily seem to have a lot of bad weight on him. He doesn't seem overweight or anything like that. He's just a big body who could potentially be a grinder for Miami in the run game.
Yeah, Gabby, that's what stands out to me. And that's what I wanted to mention is, with that size, it looks good, in that sense where, well. And it doesn't always happen like that. Sometimes with size, especially for a young player. Another thing for a young player, a young offensive lineman is it's not uncommon to hear some of the things that you're mentioning in terms of an every play, every rep thing. Sometimes these guys are just used to being the biggest guy out on the field. And it is a transition to take that to an every play type mentality, type of mode when you get to the next level. And again, as you mentioned, plenty to work with here in Tommy Kinsler with his size. He does have the ability. He's someone that I'm very intrigued by because, again, I think he's got a chance to be a good one at Miami, continues to work, continues to develop. He doesn't have to have that expectation of playing immediately, and I like when players don't have to have that. But that doesn't mean he can't be a contributor at some level, whether it's special teams out there on the field or whatever it might be. Or as we saw this past season for Miami, you need depth on the offensive line. You never know when guys will go down. The way it looks with Miami's roster, there's a lot of offensive linemen slated to come back as it stands, but not a lot of proven guys, particularly in that second unit. So we'll see how Tommy kind of fits into this mix at Miami with this roster as it currently stands.
Yeah, I think a guy that, again, Coach Mirabal, Coach Cristobal should be excited to get their hands on. These guys are offensive line, background dudes like through and through. And I think that these are the types of guys that they're kind of used to bringing in. You look at that Oregon offensive line here in 2022, those are all Cristobal and Mirabal guys. And those guys were a semifinalist for the Joe Moore Award. You look through the star rankings and I think every single one of them it was a 3-star guy. I think maybe one was a 4-star junior college guy. But this is their bread and butter. I mean, they trust their evaluations on the offensive line. They get these types of dudes, they coach them up, and these guys are eventually high level, contributors and extremely, extremely efficient in terms of being, run blockers, pass blockers, all those things. So again, I'm encouraged about the size, the clay that Tommy Kinsler has to work with, and I think he can be a factor moving forward.
Miami lands offensive lineman Antonio Tripp, originally from Baltimore, Maryland, made the move to IMG Academy for his senior year, a highly competitive environment. I think that was good for Antonio to do that, be around some other Miami commits, and I think that definitely helped with his progression as a player.
Yeah, I think that was a big part of the decision to move to IMG Academy was to be to be there with Francis, to be there with some of the other guys there, to kind of be pushed by them, to kind of just get to know these guys too. Again, I mean, I think that this is a part of, the mentality of the kid that's going into Miami is these guys just really were kind of all in, bought in, wanted to make this thing right. And I think Tripp going down to the Sunshine State where he really could have stayed home his senior year, been around the people he was familiar with, and he made a business decision to make that move. I think it shows how serious he is about improving his craft, about getting bigger, faster, stronger, all those different types of things, more athletic, more versatile, more, all the things that offensive linemen need to do, and training with a guy like Francis Mauigoa, who is, the cream of the crop of the position of the offensive line. I think was a strong move for him, a smart move for him. And Antonio Tripp, I mean, has been one of the earlier commitments in this class, kind of one of the guys that got this thing rolling, and really has just been a vocal advocate for the program since, early on when he committed. I mean, he's been that type of guy, and him coming full circle, putting his name in ink and signing with the Hurricanes is a big moment for him.
And I think that's always great to see and great to hear when players, not only do they make their commitment, but they make it known why they picked Miami, why it's the great place, or wherever school they're going to go to. And he, once again, Miami had a tough, rough season, and he still stayed by that, really believes in what's going on at Miami. He obviously does so by making his commitment official with the signing. And I think it's good. He a very vocal guy, one of those guys that definitely felt strongly about Miami. 6'3", 300 pounds, projects as a guard, kind of at that level, at the next level. So he's certainly someone to watch for. Not a highly regarded guy like some of the other guys in this class. 3-star recruit, top 40 interior lineman according to the 24/7 Sports composite rankings. But again, we touch on some mentality stuff. There's things to like about some of the things he's bringing to the table, kind of his approach to the game with what we know of him so far.
Yeah, I mean, Antonio Tripp, again, another guy that has that right mentality in terms of being an offensive lineman. He wants to come in here and he wants to compete. And, maybe he's not one of these day one contributors, but he's the guy that can, continue to work here, gets to Miami in January, gets into that strength and conditioning program and all those things. And I think down the line, I think you're looking at a potential rotational piece, a potential starter, whether that be at the guard or maybe even at center. I think that's a potential landing spot for Tripp down the line as well. So again, I know that he's someone that people around the program are excited about, ready to kind of bring him into the program and get to work, kind of see what they got with him. I think Tripp is one of those guys that still has maybe a ways to go in terms of his development. But I think once he gets there, I think he definitely shows promise in terms of being an offensive lineman who can potentially contribute here.
Miami lands an offensive lineman with a very intriguing background in Frankie Tenal, originally from Australia, moved to California before finally settling at Miami at LaSalle High School for his senior year. 6'5", 315, plenty of size, not a highly regarded guy, but someone certainly to pay attention to as he continues to get experience playing the game of football.
Yeah, I think that this is a Mario Cristobal, Alex Mirabal special. Offered him over the summer after getting him on campus for an unofficial visit. Really was just a virtual unknown. No one knew anything about this guy. I mean, when I met him, he had like an old 24/7 profile from a different school in California, had been in Australia for a year. It was an interesting one, but I think that there are other Power 5 programs that ended up coming along here, Chris. I mean, Auburn, Louisville, Mississippi State, Missouri, Oregon, Penn State, like all these people ended up offering once his senior film started to circulate. And at that point, Miami had done their job in terms of securing Tinilau. Has more of a rugby background, hasn't played a ton of organized football, settled in at the tackle spot for LaSalle. Probably projects more as a guard. But again, man, I mean, you talk about the size and the mass, 6'5", 315, and again, kind of a self-starter, a kid that understands that he is kind of still in the process of even just learning the position. And I think something that encouraged a lot of people around Frankie Tinilau and the Miami program is that he consistently got better over the course of the year. His conditioning improved, his technique improved, his overall understanding and feel for the position improved. And I know that they believe that down the line, Frankie Tenal is going to be someone that gets into games and contributes for them. And I think that this is someone that they're super excited about, and they're very happy to be bringing along in this class.
When we saw him over the summer, it definitely stood out to me with his size because, again, he's one of these guys that, Frankie's definitely one of these guys that recruiting fans of the game really likes to follow because he was a hidden gem in a sense. You don't see that nowadays with these guys really coming out of nowhere and becoming intriguing prospects. But when we saw him this summer, the size, the personality stood out definitely. And then we got a chance to see him at his first scrimmage. And as you mentioned, he did improve as the season went along. A competitive schedule there at LaSalle, playing some tough opponents, and that's what you want to see from guys. You want to see the consistent improvement over the years, and that gives you intrigue, or it gives you confidence that maybe he can continue to get better as he moves forward with his college career.
Yeah, Chris, you mentioned just the hidden gem stuff. I remember, I think it was the first day of May or something like that. Maybe it was March. I know a recruiting period had just opened up where they could have kids on campus. Frankie Tenal was the first one through the door. They offer him. I don't live far from campus. I start messaging the kid, hey, like, where can I find you? Are you close by? Like, I need to just be able to meet you or whatever. Like, I need to. So I remember meeting him outside of All Canes, right there on campus, basically on campus, and just being kind of mesmerized by the size and just his whole deal. That's when the first time I heard his story about the Australia and all these different things. And I mean, I'm a Frankie Tenal fan. I'm rooting him on for his career. And, I do think he has an awesome story. And I hope that, over the course of his Miami career, as he improves and as he becomes a factor for these guys, that he gets to tell it on a national scale.